Hello and good evening, everybody. And tonight I would like to present to you episode 49 of Album Rant. And I've kind of decided to steer my attention and my focus towards a new wave of British heavy metal artists called Diamond Head. And looking back in kind of a retrospective sense, I probably should have made this my second episode of Album Rant, but you know what they say, better late than never, I guess. So here we are, and at least we get to hear the episode, and at least we get to hear the music. Now, these guys originated in England in the early 70s, I want to say. Not the early 70s, the late 70s. And they were composed of Sean Harris on lead vocals and occasional rhythm guitar, Brian Tatler on lead guitar, Colin Kimberly on bass guitar, and Duncan Scott on the drums. And tonight, we are going to look at their debut release entitled Lightning to the Nations. Now, it's very unfortunate, but these guys really had a hard time getting their feet off the ground. They had recorded a ton of series of demos and submitted them to record companies and were constantly passed down, and it's really, really unfortunate. And I can imagine it was quite depressing as well, because they saw other artists that were also originating around the same time and had very similar musical styles, such as Iron Maiden and Angel Witch and Samson and Saxon and Def Leppard. They were all getting record deals, but Diamond Head was kind of falling through the cracks, unfortunately. But what ended up happening was they did end up touring with AC/DC and Iron Maiden, and that definitely got them some publicity. Obviously, they would be the opening act because they were not nearly big enough at the time to headline their own concerts. But again, exposure is exposure, and I guess it's better to take a little bit of exposure rather than no exposure. But eventually, in the early 80s, they finally, after recording a series of demos, got a record contract with a record company called Happy Face Music, or Happy Face Records. And yes, that sounds incredibly silly. I don't think they were very big or anything, and that's probably the reason why most people have never even heard of them. But, you know, at least they got their music published. Well, the thing is this. When they first released this album, there was no title. There was no artwork. This is not the original artwork. And in fact, I know of two other sets of artwork that came in between the initial release and what you're looking at right now. So this album has gone through a lot of revolving doors of artwork. But the original release, and it was limited to only 1,000 copies, had no artwork, no title of the band, no album title, no credits, no track list. And I have been trying my hardest on eBay to try to find a copy of that original release, and well, I can't find any. So I guess all the ones that were released were either destroyed or buried under the sand for no one to find it ever. And you're probably asking yourself, why was the album cover just blank? And I'll give you the reason right now, and you are going to have a hard time believing this, but I promise you, this is actually true. They had a very, very limited budget, both the band and the record company. And the reason for it is this: the band's manager actually owned a cardboard factory, and he could produce blank record sleeves at incredibly low prices, and that was a way for the band to save money. Yes, I am not joking, okay? But fortunately, after this release, they did acquire the attention of MCA Records, and they did release a proper second album, but that's another discussion for another time. Right now, I am just focusing on Lightning to the Nations. And as you can see right here, this is the 2022 re-release version, and, you know, it's definitely got a pretty Pretty cool artwork, as I can say right there. A very cool album cover, and obviously this was not what they originally intended, but it is what we ended up with. So opening this up right here, we've got a nice little gatefold. We have quite the extensive biography and some pictures of the band during the day, and yeah, it's a pretty good insert right there. And if you look very, excuse me, if you look very, very closely, you can see they've actually written an analysis of all of the songs on this album, and it's pretty interesting. But let's go ahead and look over here on the back. Yeah, this thing still does not have credits to the band or anything, but I've already told you who they are. And so let's look at the track list. And it all starts with side A. And the first thing we're going to hear is called Lightning to the Nations. And by the way, why did this album get the title Lightning to the Nations? As I said previously, originally there was no title. Well, they called it Lightning to the Nations because Lightning to the Nations was the first track off this album. That's it. That's the reason. So yeah. But anyways, Lightning to the Nations kicks things off, and I'm going to tell you right now, this thing is anthemic. As soon as this thing starts, you're like, yeah, these guys have something to say. These guys are here to make a statement. These guys are here to say once and for all, we are here in the name of metal and rock and roll, and we are not going anywhere. And again, it's got a nice little intro. It's kind of slow. It goes da-dun-dun-dun, da-dun-dun-dun. But then after that, the whole thing starts picking up, and it starts getting a lot faster. And then we get the chorus, which is very, very simple, but it's Sean Harris going, and I bring you lightning to the nations, to the nations. And I really, really love it. So yeah, that is the first track called Lightning to the Nations. But then we move to the second track entitled The Prince. And as I said before, Lightning to the Nations kind of built itself up, and it kind of got into the groove and everything before really starting taking off. The Prince, on the other hand, just comes out swinging right out of the gate. And it's got a very, very good 1-minute opener. It's got this incredible, very fast rhythm to it. And it just keeps going and going and going and going until it stops and goes dun 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 dun, and it's really, really awesome. Strangely enough, that rhythm almost kind of reminds me of Curse of the Pharaohs by Merciful Fate, which I have talked about on this channel and may revisit it sometime. But yes, after that intro, it gets very, very fast, and it's, like I said, incredibly explosive, and I love it. Very, very fast rhythm. But basically what I kind of like about this one is during the chorus, there's really nothing to it. There's not any kind of big, epic, emotional chorus or anything, but it does stop for a bit. We got a nice little bass interlude, which I think was a nice touch. But yeah, The Prince, I definitely give my approval to. Then we come to the third track entitled Sucking My Love. Yes, that is the name of the song, as ridiculous as it is. And I'm going to say this, I do not know this is my favorite song about getting a blowjob, but it's definitely up there. But unlike the first two songs, this one is very, very dark and gloomy. It's almost sludgy, but at the same time, that sleaze from the theme of this lyrical content is just oozing out of it. And I think it's very, very appropriate given the subject matter and everything. But yes, it starts out with that kind of slow intro, but then it starts picking up and picking up and picking up, and boy, this song is tasty! Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. But of course, in the middle, and by the way, this song is over 9 minutes. I think it's one of the longer songs in this band's catalog. It gets a little bit softer, and we get some very, very sexual tension in the middle, but then it starts picking right back up and goes right back into the main riff, and just coming out of that pit of darkness, it's pretty awesome, and Even though this is a very, very silly song, I really do love it. And side A is definitely very strong. 3 very, very great tracks, but I think Sucking My Love is my favorite, believe it or not. Maybe another day it might be The Prince, but for now it's Sucking My Love. But then we come to side B, and it kicks off with the big magnum opus entitled Am I Evil? And yes, when the thing first starts kicking off, it's the riff, it sounds a lot like Child in Time by Deep Purple, which I have covered before, that dun 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 dun, and I like it. I mean, I love both artists, but I mean, the riff, it totally works in both scenarios. And then it starts slowing down a bit. We get a very, very thunderous, or very, very momentous guitar solo from Brian Tatler, and then it starts moving into the main riff. Dun, 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 dun. And this thing is very, very slow and very, very dark. And I think the lyrical content deals with the fact that whoever's perspective this is told from, his mother was a witch who was burned alive, even though she was a nameless little bitch. But he's questioning that if he wants revenge for the death of his mother, does that make him an evil person? I don't know. But even after the first 2 verses, it goes verse, chorus, and the chorus is very simple. Am I evil? Yes, I am. Am I evil? I am man. Woo woo. And after that, it starts picking up and it starts getting much, much faster. And this song has always reminded me of Hallowed Be Thy Name in that sense by Iron Maiden. And the fact that it starts out with a very, very slow and very, very brooding rhythm before it starts picking up and gets very, very explosive. I am sure Iron Maiden was at least somewhat inspired or influenced by Diamond Head, and I think that is really, really amazing. Side note, Lighting to the Nations and Am I Evil were actually re-recorded for the band's second studio release entitled Borrowed Time, which was released 2 years later. But I gotta say, I think these original releases are better because they were kind of pursuing a more commercial sound on Borrowed Time. Then we get Sweet and Innocent. It's probably the most straightforward song on here, and it's definitely the least well-known, which I think is kind of unfortunate, but again, it's buried under a whole bunch of classics. But Sweet and Innocent is still a very, very strong track. It's got a very, very swinging rhythm to it, and again, the chorus may be nothing to write home about, but again, it's all made up for by the guitar work, the rhythm, and the songwriting. But then we get It's Electric, which I heard was very much inspired by AC/DC, and I can kind of see that. But nice little bass intro, and then it starts moving and grooving into a very, very fast rhythm, and I really like it. Again, it's rather simplistic, and it may not be the most complex song they've ever done. In fact, I think this is the shortest song from this album. It's only about 3 minutes or so, but it's still a stone cold classic, and I highly recommend it. It's electric! It's electric! But then we end with Helpless, which is a little bit over 6 minutes or so, and I think this is a much stronger song than Sweet and Innocent and It's Electric. Starts out nice little drum intro, and then it moves into a very, very, very fast rhythm, and I really, really like it. It's definitely, unlike some of the previous tracks, like Sweet and Innocent and It's Electric, it's got a lot of emotion behind it, which I really like, and I think it's a very, very solid Diamond Head track, and it's definitely one of their most well-known ones. But yeah, it definitely has some thrash influences on it, and I can definitely see why later thrash metal artists were influenced by this, and it's really great. Now, we have the first 2 verse-chorus arrangements, and then it starts moving into another section where most of it is instrumentation, which I also really do respect. But again, it closes out very well, and it's got a very dark and brooding ending to it, which I think closes the album out very, very well. But my favorite from side B is definitely going to be Am I Evil, and it was no contest. Second place is definitely Helpless, but Am I Evil definitely comes out on top. And so for that, those are my two favorite tracks from Lightning to the Nations. But guys, in all honesty, this record needs to be heard. This record is a classic, an underrated classic, but a classic nonetheless. And the thing is this has gone through many different versions, unfortunately. From what I understand, this was initially just supposed to be a demo. It wasn't actually supposed to be an actual full-length album, but it got so incredibly popular, and it ended up being what the band is most well known for. As I mentioned earlier, they did kind of pursue a more commercial appeal after this, and I think that's very, very unfortunate because they definitely had a cult following going with Lightning to the Nations, and well, this is definitely Diamond Head at their very best. And I do recommend this album on vinyl. Now, if you are gonna buy their material on CD, this right here is the album. This is the exact same mix as the vinyl. This is the release you should get on CD. However, they have also released a compilation album called Behold the Beginning. And if you look over here, it includes the tracks from Lightning to the Nations, aside from the title track, ironically, along with some B-sides and some tracks that were not released on the actual album. Well, here's the thing. These are remixes. These remixes were remixed, I guess, in the year 1986 by Lars Ulrich, of all people, and they pale in comparison to the original mix. I would not suggest buying this compilation, Behold the Beginning. I would suggest buying the actual album, but make sure you get the studio releases or the studio mixes, the original studio mixes. This vinyl has it, and this CD release has it, so I can at least say that. But anyways, that is going to conclude my episode tonight of Album Rant, and as I have said many, many times, I do recommend this album. It's a classic. It's been very influential, and it's just kind of unfortunate that these guys did not last as long as they should have, because I think they had a lot of potential that was not fully fulfilled. So yeah, we have that. But anyways, once again, thank you very much for joining me. Next time, we are going to be taking a look at the memoirs of a complete and total madman. But until then, have a very pleasant evening.